Mm. All right. Do you have any online presenters
Yeah,
for this
three
session?
of them. Three of them
Who
are
are they? Is it John?
John and Goodchild.
All right. So I'm gonna make him co-host. And the other one is Meghan.
So after that session, we shall look at them.
Yeah. Can you say something, John? Hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear
all
me?
right. Yes, we can hear you. And
Great.
Meghan is online as well.
Hi there, can you hear me?
All right, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Are they here in the room as well?
Excuse me?
Are they here in the room?
This guy?
Yeah.
No, they are at home, I think.
Yeah, but are they here in the room?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yes. So when they start the session, they need to share the screen.
Yeah.
And when when you're done with the session, then just stop sharing. That's basic. That's it.
Yeah.
Anything, I'll be around. Just
All right.
for me. All right.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So far, yeah, I'm just a check.
So you want me to go around the microphone for questions?
Hello, Meghan and John. Hello, John and Meghan. We shall be starting with the next 7 minutes. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Both here and around the world. I want to welcome you to our session on partnerships and collaboration. I'm by the name Robert Buwule from Chambogo University in Uganda, and I will be the chair of this session. Yeah, it's already 1:30, and I think it's time to start. According to our program, our first presenters, please. Our first presentation is titled More Than Just Infrastructure, How Collaboration is Essential to Building an Open Research Data Repository Community in Canada. It will be presented by two people, John Huck and Meghan Goodchild. John Huck is a metadata librarian at the University of Alberta Library and a member of the library's Dataverse support team. He is the chair of the Dataverse North Expert Group, which is part of the Research Data Management Network of experts within the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. The expert group contributes to the coordination of Dataverse infrastructure and services in Canada. His areas of expertise include metadata standards, geospatial metadata, linked data, and RDF technology. John is joined with Meghan Goodchild, who is a research data management systems librarian at Queen's University and scholar portal of the Ontario Council of University Libraries. At Queen's, Meghan collaborates with campus partners to improve workflows and services supporting the research data lifecycle. As part of the Scholars Portal Dataverse team, she participates in national infrastructure development and co-leads the monthly Dataverse community meetings with an aim to help build local capacity and to receive feedback for community-driven efforts. She holds a Master's of Information Studies and a PhD in Music Theory from McGill University. So, John and Meghan, you're welcome to take us away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the introductions. We are really delighted to be here today, albeit virtually, to discuss our experiences building an open research data repository community in Canada. As an overview of our talk today, we will begin with a historical discussion of early currents of Dataverse in Canada, leading up to establishing a national Dataverse repository. We will then describe our collaborative efforts to build an inclusive national Dataverse community and leave you with some thoughts about the future as well. So, to begin, early currents of Dataverse in Canada. Let's answer the question, what is Dataverse? Dataverse is an open source repository platform that allows users to deposit, publish, share, and discover research data. Since 2006, the Institute for Quantitative Social Science at Harvard University leads the development of and maintains the Dataverse software. Currently, there are over 78 installations around the world and a global community of contributors to the software development. Although developed with quantitative social science data in mind, Dataverse supports multidisciplinary deposits and provides support for the FAIR principles. Over the past several decades, academic libraries in Canada increasingly recognize the need to support research data management activities, and specifically to establish and support research data repositories for data deposit, sharing, and discovery. In the early 2010s, institutions across Canada began hosting local instances of Dataverse software. This map represents the landscape of Dataverse installations around 2017, including the University of British Columbia, the University of Alberta, and Scholars Portal Dataverse, which was a shared service of the Ontario Council of University Libraries, representing 21 institutions. Academic libraries were directly involved with providing support and managing the deposit workflow, including data curation activities. And as a result, there was a recognized need to share knowledge and expertise, which led to the formation of Dataverse North, which John will discuss next.
Great, thank you, Megan. So yes, it was within this national context that the stakeholders at several institutions across Canada came together in 2017 to form the Dataverse North Working Group. So the working group was part of the Portage network of experts, which consisted of a set of committees and groups focused on different aspects of research data management. Portage was an RDM organization sponsored by the Canadian Association of Research Libraries. And the mandate of Dataverse North was to develop a community of practice for libraries using or interested in using the Dataverse North, the Dataverse repository platform for research data in Canada. And the group quickly set up several sub-working groups to address specific areas of priority. Next slide, please. So by the end of the first year, Dataverse North had produced a report with recommendations from each of its working groups. The most significant recommendation came from the Business Models Group, which had conducted a survey of Canadian institutions using or hosting Dataverse in order to document their experiences and gauge their capacity for supporting a Dataverse service. The group had also conducted an environmental scan of repository service models. And based on that research, the group recommended that a national Dataverse service be established, which would be hosted at Scholars Portal at the University of Toronto Libraries. And the report articulated certain benefits of this model, which would be to realize economies of scale, enable equitable access to Dataverse for institutions across Canada, no matter whether they were large or small, and to leverage existing expertise and infrastructure, of course, especially the existing Dataverse service at Scholars Portal. Next slide, please. So over the next few years, then, the sub-working groups created additional resources for the benefit of RDM professionals supporting Dataverse, including a best practices guide for metadata, training materials, and most recently, templates that institutions operating a Dataverse service can use to develop a comprehensive set of local repository policies. And now I'll pass it back to Megan.
So turning to establishing a national Dataverse repository. So Scholars Portal Dataverse was launched in 2012 as a shared service of the Ontario Council of University Libraries hosted at the University of Toronto. And in response to the Dataverse North recommendations and increasing interest, the service was extended nationally, officially in 2020 through multi-stakeholder engagement and in partnership with the 4 regional academic library consortia across Canada. The service now features 60 subscribing institutions and continues to grow. Each institution manages their own collection and can build services to support data deposit and sharing for their local researchers. I wanted to highlight that although in this presentation we call the service Scholars Portal Dataverse, we are actually in the process of renaming to better reflect the identity of a national service. So today I can introduce to you Borealis, the Canadian Dataverse repository. So we are launching our new branding on June 23rd at borealisdata.ca. So it's a new name and new look, but it's the same underlying service. We're really excited to share that with you today. Prior to the launch of the national service, Scholars Portal Dataverse began developing support for the institutional contacts group, which was comprised of administrators from institutions using the Scholars Portal Dataverse service. This was in response to a growing need for direct support and guidance from the Scholars Portal team and to create opportunities to share knowledge among the institutional contacts about administering and managing their local service. In 2019, we created spaces for the exchange of information and feedback. First, a private email list for institutional contacts to view and respond to end user requests and to provide a forum for exchange about issues or other relevant topics. Second, we began hosting monthly meetings to share service updates, presentations, and provide opportunities for discussion. These spaces have proved to be highly effective. We see a lot of activity on the listserv, and the monthly meetings are well attended. As the service grew, it became evident that building a community support was really crucial for the success of the platform. And last year, members of the Scholars Portal Dataverse team and Dataverse North began to recognize the need for more formal collaboration and to begin to investigate how these separate communities could be better integrated. So I'll pass it over to John now.
By 2021, Dataverse North had reached an inflection point in its activities, and the landscape around it had changed as well, just in a few years. So the national Dataverse service had been established, and as Meghan mentioned, a growing community of Dataverse administrators using that service now overlapped with the membership of Dataverse North. At the same time, a major organizational change saw the Portage network be absorbed by a new, larger organization in Canada called the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. So this prompted some discussion within the group, and to ask, perhaps had the group outlived its purpose? Did it still have a purpose, or what should it be doing? However, discussion amongst the dozen or so group members, as well as other stakeholders, reaffirmed the need for a group like Dataverse North to advocate for the community of institutions that were using a Dataverse service, as well as for the professionals who were working to support it. And in recognition of this more permanent role, the group's designation within the network of experts was changed from a working group to an expert group. So within Dataverse North, there was a recognition that it should not try to duplicate the community activities that Scholars Portal was offering, but instead to collaborate with Scholars Portal to support the growing community. And so conversations with the Scholars Portal Dataverse team led to an agreement to collaborate on community development. And the Alliance RDM team was also supportive of this and offered to provide logistical support. And this support has resulted recently in the creation of an Alliance staff position tasked with providing support for community activities. But of course, perhaps more importantly, feedback from members of the community was positive and expressed support and encouragement for this vision of an open, collaborative Dataverse community. Next slide, please. In order to bring the collaboration into effect, we realized that communication and coordination would be very important. And so we created a community facilitation team that would bring together the key participants, being the Scholars Portal Dataverse team, the Dataverse North chair, and the Alliance staff that were helping with the collaboration. So this team has begun holding monthly meetings this year. And right now, a major focus is planning and coordinating the content of a monthly community meeting, which combines updates about the Dataverse service from Scholars Portal with updates from Dataverse North and other members of the community. So this meeting is essentially the same meeting that Scholars Portal had been holding for the institutional contacts group. And it's largely the same people as well. But now we consider it an open community meeting that is open to any interested people who are interested in Dataverse. And it has also been adapted to follow a bilingual format so that the institutional contacts from the province of Quebec can be included in the same meeting. Recently, the team has also served as a forum for coordinating the process of passing certain outputs from the working groups of Dataverse North through Alliance procedures for translation and publication to deliver those to the community. Next slide, please. And This slide now, or this diagram now shows the various regions of the Canadian Dataverse community, including the Scholars Portal Dataverse service team on the left, Dataverse North and its working groups and the Alliance on the right, the community facilitation team in the middle, as well as the elements of the community space down below. So the goals of the community facilitation team are really to bring the existing community activities into a common space and to harmonize them, increasing efficiency of communication between different regions of the community. So it's not to replace anything that's already there, but just to bring it into coordination. The arrows in the diagram show the flows between the different entities in the community, which form feedback loops. So inputs are in purple, outputs are in blue, and feedback is in yellow. For instance, the Scholars Portal Dataverse team and Dataverse North provide input to the facilitation team. Dataverse North likewise provides input to its working groups. The working groups create resources and outputs for the community. The community facilitation team gives direction to the community meetings and the listserv, and feedback from the community comes back to the facilitation team, at which point it can be taken back either to Scholars Portal Dataverse team or Dataverse North, or possibly on to the network of experts and the larger Alliance organization. So this is still a work in progress, but the vision here is to ensure that all the elements in the bottom section are open to all members of the community and that there is coordination amongst these elements. So this will allow community members to choose a level of engagement that fits with their needs and their time constraints. So for instance, someone with limited time might simply only follow discussions on the listserv. Someone with more time or interest might join a working group for a short-term project, or possibly Dataverse North, and in order to participate in activities at that level. Okay, over to you, Megan.
Thank you. So looking back at our progress to this point, we can identify some community building achievements. The creation of community spaces, including the monthly meetings and the listserv, has been essential as a forum to share knowledge and provide feedback. Scholars Portal recently hired an RDM research officer to help provide bilingual support for the platform and participate on the community facilitation team. Additionally, as John mentioned, the Alliance hired a bilingual data curation officer to support the community and facilitate meetings. And these are really crucial roles to offer inclusive community spaces and support, as well as to ensure the sustainability of the community. The communities developed important resources such as training modules, guides, and policy templates for institutions, and these provide important tools to share knowledge. Questions and comments from the community have been used to directly channel feedback into development efforts to create new resources for the community as well. So moving to discussion and next steps, there are some ongoing challenges with creating and maintaining a sustainable model for the Canadian Dataverse community. One challenge is to improve integration of the existing community groups, as John mentioned, which the community facilitation team really aims to tackle. And we plan to broaden community participation by establishing more open community meetings and an open listserv for those interested who are not an institutional administrator. Based on the feedback from institutional administrators, we understand that many have challenges with building capacity and knowledge to manage their institutional collection. So we aim to help mitigate these disparities in support services through community initiatives, such as creating targeted training sessions, resources, and knowledge sharing. And we need to continually evaluate whether we're meeting the needs of French speakers at the community meetings and in developing resources as well. And we aim to improve support at monthly meetings and collaboratively develop bilingual training and outreach materials. And to ensure that we're responsive to the needs of the community, we will strive to incorporate effective feedback mechanisms, which are essential to plan new activities and initiatives to direct development priorities of the platform as well. So in conclusion, we found that collaboration with the repository service provider, in this case, Scholars Portal Dataverse, and the existing community groups has been really essential to cultivate an inclusive and sustainable community around the repository. The overall aim of the community, which is to facilitate the sharing and reuse of research data, aligns with national efforts to strengthen digital research infrastructure and the RDM community. And without the community, we really feel like the repository just would not succeed. We argue that the Canadian Dataverse community as a national network really contributes to the international Dataverse community and also perhaps provides an example of a sustainable community development that we hope will continue to flourish as well. So thank you very much for your attention today. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and we're happy to answer any that you might have today as well. And also stay tuned for the official launch of our new name and website on June 23rd at borealisdata.ca. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Meghan and John, for that insightful talk on the need for collaboration when building open such data repositories. So at this juncture, I want to welcome questions, both here and online. Do you have a question? Anyone who has a question for Meghan and John? Okay. If there's no question, you can still jot it down. And if we get more time at the end of the session, we shall still entertain more questions. Yeah, but now I think we can go to our next presenter. Mina, please. Our next presenter is also online, Alicia, Hofelich. Let me first make Alicia Hofelich Mohr is going to present to us a paper titled "Many Hands Make New Opportunities: Institutional Collaborations in Supporting Data Stewardship." Alicia, I'm still introducing you. Alicia Hofelich is a research support coordinator in the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. She works with researchers on writing data management plans, designing research workflows, handling human subject data, and doing reproducible analysis in quantitative tools such as R and SPSS. She serves as a curator for social science data and statistical code in the data repository of the University of Minnesota. She holds a PhD in psychology and a master's degree in statistics from the University of Michigan. Alicia, welcome to present to us. And you.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you for the introduction. And thank you all for sticking out to the last session, I believe, in IASSIST. And thank you for John and Meghan for a really lovely talk beforehand. I think a lot of the issues they brought up really resonate with me and will be a lot of the same things that we are experiencing here at Minnesota. I also want to acknowledge my co-author, Lisa Johnston, and I'll be talking about work the two of us have done within a larger network at our university about institutional collaborations in supporting data stewardship. But before I dive in, I want to unpack a couple of the things I'll be talking about in this presentation. The first is to situate some context of our university. So we're at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, the United States. This is one of 5 coordinate campuses, and our university is split across 2 cities and within Minneapolis, split across the banks of the river, although distance feels a little shorter now that a lot of us are comfortable online. But we do have a lot of faculty and researchers. We have 18 different colleges, 12,000 graduate students, 4,000 faculty, and they're spread across over 150 departments. So it's a very large, very decentralized place with a lot of different researchers doing very different kinds of research. I also want to unpack another term that I brought up, and I know this is increasingly used in various spaces, and it's been used at our institution, and that's data stewardship. And so even though I think for those of us who are working in data management, we have a good grasp on what this means, I think institutionally, data stewardship seems maybe even a step more vague and broad than data management. And so sometimes when I'm working with folks at our institution, I feel a little bit like I'm cooking with Moira Rose. You know, you just steward the data, which is a great show, Schitt's Creek, if you've not seen it. But so I just want to unpack a little bit by how I'm seeing data stewardship used at our university. And how it might differ from data management. And so some of the major features of it is data stewardship is encompassing or seems to be encompassing a broad set of activities. I think both at the individual level, which is usually where we're focusing, and I've been focusing data management support, but also at the institutional level and making sure that institutional data is well stewarded as well as those things are supporting an individual. Like data management, ensuring data are well managed throughout their life cycle. And one of the ways I find it used at our institution is that it applies not just to the data to make sure that they are well managed and sustained and protected, but also well managing the resources supporting the data. So things like making efficient and responsible use of campus infrastructure, of storage, of compute, things like that. And so that's a slightly different take than I've heard data management being referred to in the past. So I wanted to highlight that. It wouldn't be an IASSIST talk without some data lifecycle thrown on the screen. And I know all of us are very familiar with the data lifecycle, and this is one very simplified version, but just again, emphasizing that data stewardship, like data management, is something that occurs throughout the entire life cycle. And so from researchers' perspective, they should be thinking about it throughout planning to collecting, analyzing, publishing, sharing, reusing, and preserving. And so I like to present this version of the data lifecycle, but acknowledging that it often looks more like this version from the University of Central Florida in practice, that these things are not necessarily a nice loop. They're very iterative within each part of the life cycle. There's a lot of iteration. And importantly, from a researcher's point of view, they're encountering a lot of different people, a lot of different services within the course of their life cycle. And so each of those little blue, green, purple, gray dots could be services and people that someone encounters throughout their research life cycle. And so one of the things at a broad, large university is we have a lot of people they can turn to from support in terms of resources. And this can be close to the individual researcher, like in their department or within their college. It could be a central or campus resource. It could be a system-wide resource, or it could be a resource external to the university. And so resources here, I'm thinking about people, those who work with IT, who are coordinating their grants, who are working with their financial information, collegiate research dean, experts across the university in statistics and supercomputing, data security, copyright, our tech commercialization offices, as well as repositories and other peers. So there's a lot of people university researchers can turn to. And so connecting those pieces, connecting those people are vital. One of the questions kind of perennially on our mind is how do we efficiently connect all these service providers at a large decentralized university like ours? And I will note this is not a new question. This is not a new question to IASSIST by any stretch. It's also not a new question to us and our group. At my very first IASSIST in 2014, we talked about this question and talking about the village and how we navigate around it. We've published a chapter in Kellerman Tosp's wonderful data librarianship book. One of the authors is in this session. And so we've been trying to do this for nearly a decade, as I know other institutions have done. And so one of the things this presentation is focusing on is, after a decade of this work, of trying, of finding our village, of connecting the people, where are we? So what have been the fruits and follies of this labor? Are we any better off than where we started in terms of knowledge? So starting with the path, you can see on the slide, there's a timeline stretching from 2013 to 2021, and I would say into 2022. And here on this timeline are the names of all the different groups that have been charged with this work. And these groups have been both informally gathered. So at the very top, this is the research data management, and we called these informal community of practices, was all the rage at the time. And this was a group that was initially led by both Lisa Johnston and myself, just to bring together other people who are interested in data management or helping people with data management across the university. I think we started with maybe 15 people talking about this. And this has transformed. This has eventually been charged at a university level, central level, through our office of the Vice President for Research, involving faculty, involving IT. They've gotten formal. Many of these groups have formed for a specific reason. They've dissolved, they've transformed. And so just looking over the course of time, you can see we've had a lot of iterations, and it can feel like, looking back on it, like nothing has stuck around for very long. But I do think out of all this work, and even though the groups have changed and the focuses have shifted a little bit, there have been quite a few notable wins. And I do want to focus on some of the outcomes of this work, even though who's doing this work has changed over time. So some notable wins of this work in 2015, some of the groups charged by our Vice President for Research put together a research data management policy. And this was the first at our university to really talk about and make formal ownership information expectations around archiving and retaining data and whose responsibilities they are. And this is a policy that's recently in revision for some of these groups as well. One of my favorite wins has been out of one of our grassroots movements. And so the informal community of practice that Lisa Johnston and I started in 2013 and led for a few years, brought together people who had similar kinds of issues. And so one issue on our campus at the time was a lack of storage that met high a level of security for data that was outside of our health centers. And so those of us who worked with sensitive human data didn't have any secure place to store it, or place that met the same security levels as those our university was putting into our health data. And so being able to connect those needs across the university, connect them to the people providing and able to implement the storage, we were able to get a secure storage for health data, but available throughout the university. And so that was really a university-wide effort that took a lot of grassroots movement that wouldn't have been possible without this organization or this assembly of a village. Recently, in the last couple of years, we've also used this network to assemble a storage selection tool. So at a large university like ours, we have a lot of different people who are providing IT services. So we have our central IT, we have specialized IT for healthcare, we have specialized computing infrastructure for supercomputing. We have colleges who still provide very discipline specific tools that someone might need. We have coordinate campuses that provide storage. And so as a researcher coming into this space, it can be hard to navigate this work. And so we had seen some really great work done by the Cornell University Research Data Management Service, who built this platform that our tool is based off of. And so we assembled people who know about data management and how people would be using and working with storage, and the people who ran the storage to put together this tool. And so this is a storage selection tool. And so how it works is on the left side, there's a little survey where you can click different things about where you are, security regulations of your data, how you are planning to use your data. Do you need supercomputing? Are you planning on using it on your laptop or on your phone? How do you need to access the storage? And then these boxes on the right side will gray out or stay present depending on the features associated with them. And then they can compare and contrast at the bottom what they have. And so this is a really nice, and you can find it at z.umn.edu/SST for storage selection tool. And so this was a really big win. And so one of the things also that I think we accomplished this is the meta data management around this tool. So one of the concerns was if this becomes out of date, then it's not going to be as useful. It immediately becomes all our work is for naught if it gets out of date, and then people can't trust it anymore. And so we want to make sure that the back end and the management and review of it was also as reproducible as possible. So as different people became in charge of it, the way we worked with it, those people could pick up and keep moving and refer to the people who are changing storage. And so one of the things that was our specifications of how we want to build it is we wanted all the data that filled this tool to come from a Google Sheet. And we wrote processes around how that's updated, the logic of doing that, who is charged with updating when that happens. So I think that was a big and a different way of putting together a university resource that I don't think would have been possible if we didn't have all these different voices and perspectives in the room. As part of that too, we also gathered our information security folks because we found when we were testing that tool that people didn't know what their data security classification was. Our university policy really isn't focused towards research data, so it can be hard to navigate the security you need for your data. And so we worked with a group to try to classify research data according to our data university policy, but also many other laws that are outside our university policy that may affect how someone stores their data. And so we tried to do this in collaboration with our security folks and other data management people and storage people to help researchers know what to choose. And so we came up with this tool as well as some guidance there. Another major win for us of this group is the storage restructuring initiative. So this is something that our IT group has been doing over the last several years. And this was a move from initially we had one kind of type of university storage server. So everything from your departmental documents to your research data to data from projects that you're not touching along, for a long time, but aren't in a point to share or can't be shared. We're all on the same storage. And so IT went from moving everything in one box to maybe we have different boxes for different needs. And this was primarily motivated institutionally by expense. So having data that didn't need the high level expensive storage sitting on the high level expensive storage meant that it was very, very expensive over time and it wasn't sustainable. But in terms of which boxes we need, how many other different boxes we need, this was a question that IT alone can't answer. And so this was something that was driven by faculty feedback. They assembled groups from this network, had both faculty as well as research staff and IT staff figuring out what the boxes are. Once they had the lay of the land, they relied heavily on some of our champion networks that I'll talk about in a minute to get feedback on their implementation. So now instead of kind of one storage, we have storage for static projects. So things that are inactive and maybe can't be shared or that has pieces of it that are shared and other pieces can't be, just inactive projects. departmental projects versus research projects. So a little bit different storage for different needs. So speaking of networks, some of the work that happened across this time is formalization of the different networks of folks. So one thing we found in our informal community of practice is it's really nice to know people at different places at the university who are doing similar things. But it's really hard to sustain that informally. And really relies on who's kind of running the network. And so one of the efforts here was formalizing this network into a storage champion network is how it was originally envisioned. And we had a really lovely, this gives me, 80s vibes, this logo. But this was comprised of both research and IT experts across different sections of the university, from the departments to the college to the campus and system campuses supports. A big piece of this was having training sessions as well as webinars to keep the community connected and informed. But this unfortunately was replaced in most institutions before too long with a different kind of branding and a different kind of network. And so last year, this was replaced with what we're calling the Research Cyber Infrastructure Champions. And so some of the big pieces here, which I think was an overall positive move, is we realized we really needed dedicated staff time. So one of the key pieces in running a network and keeping people engaged, and I think something Meghan and John both mentioned too, is having people whose job it is to run the network. So you can't rely on people who are just volunteering for this. And so we did have some dedicated staff time, people who are charged with doing this and formally in their job description. The word cyber infrastructure kind of sounds weird, but I think it's the move beyond storage. So how do we help people network beyond everything? Because once you're storing your data, you still need to get it out. You still need to work with it. You need to connect it to compute, and it's over a network. And so there's a lot of pieces that are needed in order to actually work with and manage data. And so trying to reflect that in the name. There's also more intentional recruitment of academic and library involvement in IT decisions, and making sure that this spanned a wide variety of people and places. And this is also a group that has been able to get into policy development and guidance, so having a little bit broader reach as well. And with the dedicated staff time, there's also some more extensive webinar series and a newsletter and other kinds of connections that I think could not have been made without some dedicated funding and staff. So at the end of all of this, we've had some notable wins. I just want to reflect a little bit on our village and villages and the people within it. So some of the things that are a challenge still is that our campus-wide data management strategy at the top level is still predominantly led by IT. I think even though with intentions to have a broader variety of perspectives represented, we still get into the issue that the people who are doing this work, who are most connected in the ways they are communicating, are still IT. That's where the funding is coming for these positions too. And so I think that is part of it. The network, again, is very large. We went from, a dozen people in a room talking about data management over the years to we have over 120 people in this network, our research cyber infrastructure network. One thing I alluded to at the beginning too is in all these conversations, both data management and data stewardship can mean very different things, both to IT, to general counsel, our lawyers at the university, as well as researchers. One of the issues I've faced and heard recently is this, data management referring to responsible use of storage, and how do we make sure that we're still thinking about the data, because the data are the important pieces, and we want to make sure people are using things responsibly, but that the focus isn't on saving the university money or trying to use data management as that. I think it can be a good tool, but just being careful of how it's wielded and by whom it's wielded has been a challenge. Another challenge is that as issues become more narrow and specific, as people are coming to the network with research questions, what are great, there are fewer gains from assembling a village. And sometimes a village seems like maybe there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. And the line between where that happens and where it's useful versus clumsy is one we're still trying to navigate. And I think the need for sustainable communication is a huge one. I think there's been a big help with having staff time, but just communicating and sharing out what happens. Now that we have 120 people, it's not, do we have meetings? Do we have, how do we hear from everyone without everyone being in 2-hour meetings, all the time? So that's also been a challenge. I will say, reflecting a little bit too and translating to different villages and thinking and incorporating Lisa's perspective now that she is in a different village is really our success. And I think what has been great about these efforts is bringing people together under different units. And I think framing this as a campus-wide initiative, even though the specific labels and specific units running this have changed over it, just kind of owning it together as an institution and celebrating those outputs of this system are really important in continuing to sustain and believing in this work. Likewise, the trajectory of this work is advancing, even if the villages change and the name changes and who's running it changes, the trajectory is a net positive. And from Lisa's perspective and the time she's been in another institution, these challenges seem similar across institutions. And I'd love to hear, perspectives of folks here, as well as for different data types. So for people who are more in an enterprise institutional data situation versus research data, still run into these same challenges and questions. And so it's common across places, it seems. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions and stories, and thank you all for listening. Our contact information is here, and I will acknowledge my uncredited slide editor. Thank you.
A round of applause. Yeah, thank you, Alicia, for that fantastic talk on data stewardship. So I welcome questions or comments. Any comment or question from here? Okay.
Thank you so much. Could you please very briefly tell us where does the funding for this wonderful of where it comes from? Do the researchers of climate, so from their grants, the faculty, how do you organize so that you have sustainable funding for the important work? Thank you.
Alicia?
I'm sorry, I could not hear that online. Could you repeat the question?
Sorry. Yeah. Where does the funding for this important wonderful work come from? Does it come from the grants, the individual research projects, from the faculty? How do you organize the funding that you have a sustainable solution and can develop fantastic work?
Yeah, and sorry, it's still kind of choppy online, but on my end. But so I think you're asking about who is in the network and how we're organizing it. Is that correct?
Who is funding this? Who is funding the project?
Oh yes, who is funding? Yes, thank you. Sorry. Yes, so who is funding this position is our IT department. And so our institutional technologies area are the people who are funding and employing these, the network coordinators, as well as the people who are staffed to promote this. And I think primarily that's because our IT has historically not been well connected to researchers and to data management. And so it benefits them greatly to have that perspective. And so that is my intuition on why they are willing to fund this, because the feedback they get and the connections they get on what kind of things to run and where to go are really valuable. So it has been IT driven, which I think is why that representation is so much more than other groups. Yeah, and I see one in the chat. How do you handle diverse recommendations for RDM from diverse? Right. Yeah. That is a challenge we have. And also just getting things up the chain. I think this is a challenge where there's a democracy of people and then sometimes not a clear decision maker. And so we've had situations where they go both ways. So one is that we hear all the diverse recommendations and no one makes a decision, and that's been a struggle, and not knowing who makes the decision or who is the decider, because everyone, seems to have equal standing, or in some cases, and one specific example I can think of is some of the new research data storage is that ultimately it is the IT owner who has the decision. And so then they just have to go with it, and they go with what seems the most cost effective for that. And I would say that as a group, we make recommendations and then we don't always see the process for the decisions. And so I think someone is deciding when those get decided. And unfortunately, I'm not sure there's not a consistent thing, but yeah, no, that's a great point. And this is a big challenge. I think when you have a group making suggestions, someone needs to decide. That process either isn't always there and isn't always transparent. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I think we can go to our next presenter. Is there any other questions? Yeah, our next presentation, if we get more time at the end of the session, we shall entertain more questions. But let's go to our next presenter, who is none other than Christy Thompson. She's going to present to us a paper, Keep It Simple, Stupid, Designing a Stripped Down DMP Template. Christy Thompson is a research data management librarian at Western University and previously held positions at data librarian at the University of Windsor and data specialist at Princeton University, and has over 20 years experience working with teaching about data. She co-edited the book Data Librarianship, the Academic Data Librarian in Theory and Practice for SCRL, and her research interests include data rescue, survey anonymization, and quantitative theory. So Kristi, you're welcome to present to us.
Hi there. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm Christy Thompson. Would also like to introduce my co-presenter, Liz Hill, who is my colleague at Western University, is a data librarian with a great deal of experience and has research and interests in the history of data librarianship as well as quantitative literacy. And she's going to be speaking first.
Thanks, Christy, for that introduction. And thanks everybody for attending our session. It feels as though Alicia's presentation and Meghan and John's before us have set us up really well for our topic, in that you got a little piece of the Canadian context and also relationships on campus. So thank you. Our conference presentation grew out of work that Christy and I have done at Western University. That's our home institution in London, Ontario, Canada. Kristi is our research data management librarian, a role that's relatively new at Western, with Kristi being the first incumbent since 2019. I'm the data librarian, and Kristi and I find that our roles overlap and we support each other quite a bit. We are at a research intensive university, and the concept of research data management and needing to support research data management by different parts and stakeholders of the university has involved a lot of concern and panic over a number of years. We're going to share with you today how we approached tailoring the DMP tool to suit researcher needs at our institution. So this visual kind of says it all, a level of panic. For many years, the tri-agencies, or the national research granting agencies in Canada, have indicated that data management, data deposit, data strategies, and writing data management plans would be required. The requirements have begun to roll out during 2022 into 2023. The library community in Canada has been talking about and planning for this for a very long time and has developed tools. So many of us at this conference know what all this is about, but other people on our campuses may not have been at the same tables as us for a while. We've been engaging with other partners on our campus as these requirements have become more real, with dates associated with them. It's been an interesting journey. We, along with a manager within the library, have been part of a research data management working group. We've been planning for meeting the upcoming and now current RDM requirements. We have members on our working group, including the research office, ethics, individual researchers, and IT. It turns out, as we've met with them over the last couple of years, we've been talking about the same things, but with different lingo, vocabulary, and differing levels of anxiety. This slide is just a quick pick for you to sort of see what that composition looks like. Kristi and I are the librarian members. As I mentioned, we have a senior library administrator. We have a director from the research ethics office, someone from research services, a senior manager from IT, faculty representatives, including the AVP of research, a data champion from the faculty area, and a special advisor to our president on data strategy. So it's been a really great group. Our special advisor individual isn't able to attend many of the meetings, but he does keep track of what's going on and messages going back and forth, and will weigh in on topics as they arise or share with us information that he's aware of. The DMP assistant is a tool that's been adopted quite widely in Canada. I'm sure many of you are aware of this particular tool or something that looks a lot like it. The portage network that Meghan talked about and that John talked about as well in Canada has been instrumental in rolling this out as the national solution. And we brought this tool to our working group. In the early days, when we were meeting with our campus partners, there was a lot of confusion about what the DMP assistant was. Some people were confusing the DMP assistant with the mandate, and we grew to realize that along with the anxiety, it's just a lack of understanding of what tools had already been developed and were ready to be used, and how we could connect those with people on the campus. Like many things that seem to be new territory, it takes time to kind of come to a common understanding. And it turns out we really weren't that far apart. So our path to adoption was digging into the tool. We had many conversations, lengthy working meetings, and an ongoing working document that was on our team site with lots of comments and suggestions contributed by the working group members. Over last summer, we came up with some very meaningful and useful content that demonstrated that people wanted the tool to fit our environment. And that iterative and collaborative process was really useful in terms of being more comfortable with understanding the tool and how to roll it out on campus. This slide just shows the categories that are available in the default DMP assistant template. Many of you, as I mentioned, are familiar with this tool or something like it. There is a great deal of built-in contextual help embedded within each question category. Our working group wanted to customize the questions and the guidance to reflect our campus local environment. There was also frustration and confusion about questions that were overlapping with other processes that researchers have to go through, like the ethics application. And they wanted to see ways to streamline that so that there wasn't so much duplication or level of frustration imposed on researchers. Some issues that we identified through feedback in the template were worked out. And through some formal and informal consultation with the groups noted on the slide, there were concerns that varied, but essentially went from a high level of fear, knowledge level low, misunderstanding or lack, or people perceiving that it didn't have a high level of understanding of RDM jargon, and not knowing what's available at Western or university and beyond. And as I mentioned on the last screen, just a level of concern that people would be annoyed with questions that might be redundant across a number of processes that they have to go through. So this slide highlights that there were tensions but shared goals. I mean, as librarians, we want to promote really nicely completed data management plans with metadata and a promise that people are going to deposit their data. The research officers and faculty want to streamline the process and have people get their funding, and the ethics officers want to make sure their requirements and practices are compliant. Our IT representative has been instrumental in sharing with us how there are approved IT solutions that researchers are encouraged to use, and they evaluate other things that sort of fall beyond outside of that list. And that's been really helpful in terms of looking at what should be in the forum and what's useful for researchers. So our approach was to simplify the tool. I think it was late last summer, in the fall, Kristi took all that feedback and came up with a more simplified version of the tool, tried to figure out what was essential, identify why the questions are being asked, make sure that plain language and the context for different options was available with guidance on the page, and reduce the number of questions and the number of sections. If providing a menu was not an example, we would give examples, and we wanted to do testing. So through our development process, Kristi initially brought this to a workshop that she had with some folks that were willing to look at it, and then some research officers at a meeting that she attended were really excited to see the simplified tool and wanted to start testing it out. And one of our data champions on our working group offered to recruit testers outside of that group and provide feedback. So the next slide shows our simplified template, just the main categories. There's 5 sections with 17 questions. And these are the main themes: the data collection, documentation, metadata, storage, and backup, preservation, sharing, and reuse. And Kristi will talk at greater length about the simplification and how the testing went.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Okay, I'm Christy Thompson, and I'm just going to talk about a bit more about our process. I'd like to show you some of the DMP questions we decided to simplify or replace, and walk you through how we changed them and why. I'm definitely not going to be covering everything we reviewed or changed, just a few representative or interesting things that came up. I'll also be sharing a few quotes from testers to help illustrate the issues that people had. So this is the original question from the default DMP template, which seemed pretty straightforward on the surface. How much space do you expect your data to take up? I mean, that seems like a reasonable thing to ask. Then we started getting feedback like, I'm not sure what a gigabyte is. Delving into the data from a data management practices survey our campus did in 2017, we noted that over 20% of researchers could not say how much storage they used on an average research project, even when given a set of options to choose from. So, what is the point of this question? Is it important that the user be able to guess if their interview recordings will take up 50 megabytes or 20 gigabytes? We decided that no, we didn't really need users to have a detailed prediction of the future or even know what a gigabyte is, nice as that would be. The main question is, will storage be a problem? After talking with our IT representative, we settled on 3 categories of under a terabyte up to 10 terabytes and more than that, basically ranging from this data storage is not going to be this working data storage is not going to be a problem to, yeah, this might be a problem. Here's another short, straightforward looking question that our testers had trouble with. What file formats are your data in? And are they good for data reuse, sharing, and long-term access? The first problem we ran into was that some of our users do not know what a file format is, let alone what file format their data is in. The second issue is, even if they do know what format their data is in, they may not know if it's a format that allows for sharing, preservation, and all those good things. And providing a paragraph or 2 of information on what to look for was not really helping. And in fact, once we did manage to explain to them whether the format they were using was good for long-term access and so on, the fact that we were asking made them worry that their funding would be jeopardized simply because they were using a software-dependent format for their research that was standard in their field or even the only tool available for doing the kind of research they needed to do. And to be honest, making them worry about that seemed kind of mean. So we came up with a list of common formats with checkboxes and a write-in option. This list will probably be expanded as we conduct additional testing. We found that people are mostly comfortable with functional descriptive terms like spreadsheets, documents, and images, and in general are more likely to recognize the name of a software than of a file format. And then we just took out the part of the preservation suitability, because that's going to be getting its own section later on in the data management plan, and we really don't need to bring it up at this point. That's not what this question should be about. All right, here's another one, storage location. For this question, the problem was less people not knowing where their data was and more an issue of people not knowing what good options were available, a topic our IT manager representative was particularly vocal about. And here's a chart from that data management practices survey our campus did in 2017. Many people used more than one method of storage, which might be good, but note that the shared campus drives and servers, which are the most secure and recommended options, were among the least popular choices. So again, we resorted to checkboxes, both to keep answering easy as possible and to inform them of our local options, with links provided for more information. If they pick one of the first 3, we can be reasonably sure that the data is being backed up by reliable systems. We also encourage multiple copies of data and so on, but putting the data somewhere reasonably secure to start with is at least a first step. If they pick one of these, good, just check the box. But if they're going to insist on putting the data on a USB stick or something, we make them explain and justify it. Okay, this is one question I got from a tester. How is long-term preservation different from storing your data? That's actually not always easy to answer if you aren't familiar with library and archive jargon. And this is another jargon-heavy question from the original template on documentation, with guidance that includes a bunch of information on metadata. Metadata standards vary across discipline, quality, accuracy, and precision, features necessary to facilitate data discovery, understanding, and reuse, restrictions on data, and so on, what documentation will be needed for the data to be read and interpreted correctly. And really, features to facilitate discovery, understanding, and reuse. This is actually a complex concept even for experts, if you think about it. I mean, how to do this properly is a topic of research and discussion, something we attend conferences on, something debated endlessly at the working groups supporting data archive development I sit on. Do we really expect a random user who hasn't had any of this specialized training to just sit down and type out a coherent answer? Even if they've attended a library RDM workshop at some point, or there's a nice paragraph of explanation in front of them? We're still considering how best to approach this one. A list of checkboxes would be ideal, at least according to our faculty representatives, but we don't want users to just check off everything on the list and say they'll create all those types of documentation just on the off chance an item is something they're supposed to produce. So we did keep this one a fill in the blank option at this point. And feedback does say that reassurance that they're not expected to provide a long list of as yet uncreated documents here is helpful. So we're getting there. The template also had a collection of ethical questions, many of which are not relevant to all situations. As one tester kept repeatedly pointing out, by noting that his participants are, well, fruit flies. It appears that users don't seem terribly reassured by guidance that informs that they don't need to answer irrelevant questions. We're hoping to make this particular problem into less of an issue as we develop additional custom simple templates for different researcher groups that just make it more obvious which questions are to be skipped or don't include those questions in the first place. A version of a DMP assistant program with some kind of skip logic would also be really good. But in the meantime, we have users being frustrated that they're apparently being asked to explain how they're going to keep treating their fruit flies ethically and keeping their data confidential and so on. And finally, a parting comment from one of our testers. Some users do actually get and support research data management. So thank you for following along with us on this journey. A revised template is still a work in progress, and we're planning to develop more specialized ones for different user groups in the future. We're very interested in any comments or feedback you may have.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Kristi, for that fantastic talk. Welcome questions from the house or online.
Hi, I was curious, is this simpler formatted DMP template going to be posted on your local university website, or is it going to be built into the Canadian DMP template option for other universities as well?
Having trouble hearing questions online. I think you are asking, is this template hosted locally, or is it part of the general tool that everyone uses? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. It is a part of the general tool that everyone uses. The tool by default allows campus administrators to develop their own templates. And when a user logs in, they have to say which campus they're coming from. And so that guides them to locally available options and default templates. So it's actually a pretty good system for that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, let's go to our last presentation today. Our last presenter is none other than Alle Bloom, who's here in person. She's going to present a paper titled "Collaboration is Key: Data Discovery in Time of Crisis." Alle is a research associate with the UK Data Service at the University of Manchester. Her role involves providing support and training to researchers who want to understand, access, and utilize social science data. She's one of the training team's experts on COVID-19 survey data and has created many resources and events to help users find access and make use of this data. And then you're welcome to present.
Great, thank you for the introduction, Robert. Hi everyone, I'm Ali Bloom from the UK Data Service User Support and Training Team based at the University of Manchester. And today I'm going to give you a little introduction, a talk about our response in the training team to the COVID-19 pandemic and how collaboration was a really important part of how we were able to ensure our users could continue to discover and use data during this time. So this is the outline of the talk. I'm conscious of time, so you're just going to have to listen to the talk if you want to know what's in it. But I will just say a little bit about scope. So I'm going to focus on the training team and our response throughout this talk for two reasons. Firstly, because I am from the training team, so that is my expertise. Secondly, because of time. But I just want to say that's not because other parts of our service didn't have really excellent responses to COVID. So the ingest team, the collections team, all worked really hard and were a key part of making this data available as well. So just a little bit of background on the UK Data Service to get started. So if you've heard some of my colleagues' talks throughout this conference, you might already know this, but we are a comprehensive resource funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, and we hold the UK's largest collection of international, social, economic and population data. Data producers such as those from local and regional governments, from community sectors and universities provide their data to us, and then we provide this data to users for secondary analysis. The data in our collections includes things like major UK government-sponsored surveys, cross-national surveys, longitudinal data, business data, census data, and we also hold some qualitative and mixed methods data as well. And our main aim is to help users access this data to do high quality research and education. We also do more than just provide the data. So the training team, which I'm part of, provide guidance and resources to help users find, access, teach, train, and make the most of our data and develop key skills in its use. We help users from a wide variety of backgrounds. So for example, those from charities in the third sector, academics, students, those from the public sector and government, and a key part of our role is to help users discover and find data that is relevant to their research. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what collaboration looks like for us prior to COVID-19. So we have always worked alongside other organisations to deliver training and facilitate access to resources, and collaboration has always been an important part of how we train at both a local and an international level. So, for example, we are a member of the Data Resources and Training Network, which is a network of UK Research Council funded data services that each provide training. So there are 15 partner data services, and we meet 4 times a year to exchange information, support collaboration in training, and we also run many joint events as a network as well. We also frequently collaborate with the National Centre for Research Methods. So this is the major research methods training provider in the UK, which is funded by the government, and we create guides, run events and various things with them as well. We're also part of CESDA, and I think for nearly 10 years, we've been running training events internationally in collaboration with them, working to create resources as well. We also collaborate to sort of secure the future of data services as well. So the QSTEP program, which is an Upwells Foundation program, is a program designed to respond to a shortage of quantitatively trained social science graduates. So what that basically means is it's a special form of training at universities and placing students into internships in data services to allow them to experience what it's like to work in that environment and hopefully encourage them into it in the future. I am a graduate of that program, so it appears it does slightly work. And at the UK Data Service, we also take on interns from that program. Last year, we had a couple of interns that we worked with on a project looking at Twitter data and looking at developing our data source pathway, which you might have heard about if you went to Sarah's talk earlier in the week. Yeah, so we're also involved in that. We also collaborate frequently with government departments when we're running conferences. And we, of course, collaborate with providers who deposit their data with us too. So I'm going to outline our response, I can't say after the pandemic, but once the pandemic started. So I'm going to discuss two main areas. So first of all, the resources we created, and secondly, the events we run. And I see both of these things as key in helping our users to discover the data they needed to kind of tackle the big questions of the pandemic. So the first resource I want to talk about is our COVID-19 theme page. And this is a theme page which takes the format of our other theme pages. And these theme pages are basically central hubs that provide resources, case studies, links to any news articles that we've kind of posted on our sort of news site, and information on how data types have been used. So we have ones on labour, education, health, and early on in the pandemic, we created this one for COVID-19 resources as well. Now, the problem we had was that there wasn't any COVID-19 data available, or there was very little COVID-19 data available at that point. So we initially started with just the key data from our existing surveys. So surveys such as the Health Survey for England, which provided information on the existence of long-term conditions, the Family Resources Survey that provided information on various other things, and also the Labour Force Survey, which gave context to working patterns. So once we actually had some COVID-19 data available, we coordinated with data providers to provide access to this, and so we were kind of aware of what we could put up on the page. And then we also hosted links to other data sources. So one example you can see up there is the Voluntary Sector Studies Network. They had a repository of third sector data, which we linked to from the theme page as well. The page went live in May 2020 and was updated monthly with new data sets or new resources as they came in. Another resource I want to talk about are the NCRM Wayfinder guides that we worked on. So these guides were part of the National Centre for Research Methods ESRC funded project on changing research methods for COVID-19. And the main guides we worked with Understanding Society, who is one of our data providers as well, to compile a guide to resources for using secondary data in the context of COVID. So how this has changed, the context of different sources of the data, changing access conditions, new methodology for those collecting the data. And then the team from Understanding Society came in and provided an excellent case study on the benefits of linking their data with longitudinal data. So by working with them, we were able to bring that really useful case study as well. But to talk about the main sort of collaborative part of this, in the planning stages, we met with researchers from the Consumer Data Research Centre from the University of Leeds and the University of Liverpool, who'd been working on their own collaborative project with Admin Data Research UK, the Office for National Statistics, and the Joint Biosecurity Centre, looking at these things called local data spaces. Do go and look it up, it's a very interesting project. And they'd been asked to work on these guides as well. We are all members of the Data Resources Training Network, so we met together, we discussed the guides and who would be best placed to write each one. And that planning was incredibly important. We worked out not only to ensure that we weren't going to duplicate across the guides, but also it meant we could share our knowledge and expertise across the different guides. So we featured the example of the ADR project as an example in our guide, and we were just able to share our knowledge. I do also want to say that the DRTN in general was a really valuable resource in the pandemic. Online meetings and emails were really key in providing us with knowledge of how to run online events, sharing that information about issues such as the new data that was being collected, and ultimately just helped with data discovery in general. So now on to a couple of examples of events. So at the UK Data Service, we normally run user conferences throughout the year, and prior to COVID-19, these were in person. In the pandemic, we moved these online. We were some of the first to do this with our Health Studies User Conference. This is a conference that provides updates on the latest development in health studies and research that has utilised them. We organise it in collaboration with NatCen, the National Centre for Research Methods, and also University College London. And it felt like a very big risk to move this online, but I'm pleased to say it was very successful. So by moving it online, we had over double the number of attendees that we have had in previous in-person events. And we had a wide reach overseas and even had some attendees from Australia. I don't know what time they would have had to get up. I don't know the time difference, but it was great to have them there. And then later in the year, we did the same thing with the Family Finance Conference, who we work with the Department for Work and Pensions. And all of our conferences since have been held online. And what I want to say about this is that this rapid and successful change was made possible because of our existing collaborations with NatCen and UCL, and because of our previous experience working together. So we have an established way of planning this conference and a good relationship to build upon this new way of doing things, to say, yeah, let's take this online. And another set of events where collaboration was key are the CESDA roadshows. So for these, we worked with other CESDA service providers on 2 events designed to provide information on CESDA's resources and also highlight data discovery. So the COVID-19 roadshow that we worked on was co-organised with Trust IT, OSDA and DANS, and was a practical deep dive into the available COVID-19 data. So we came in to talk in this, we outlined the international COVID data that was available, where users could find and access this, and we also collaborated with researchers and brought them in to present on their work that had actually used that data, so to give some real world examples. After the initial event, CESDA reached out to us again, CESDA Trust IT, and asked if we would present as part of another roadshow on cancer and major chronic diseases. This collaboration involves members from NSC and UCL, as well as a researcher that we brought in from the University of Manchester. And again, we provided a deep dive into the data, as well as demonstrating the CESDA data catalogue and tools that could be used to access it. And the key thing I want to highlight about this collaboration is that when we were planning this, we collaborated to work out what we could each bring to the session to most benefit the attendees. So we brought the data discovery. That was our experience putting together the COVID-19 page. We had a lot of ideas about the COVID-19 data that was available. And DANS and OSDA, on the other hand, for this particular event, brought some really great expertise on data management and archiving and publishing routes. So rather than running individual events, you know, that sort of were a bit disparate and didn't necessarily bring the same information, we were able to collaborate to bring the attendees a really useful event that pooled our knowledge from across Europe. So I'm nearly out of time. I just want to finish by sharing some knowledge on things that we've learned from these collaborations and what I think made them successful. So the first piece of advice, or the first piece of thing that we've learned, is to make use of your existing network. So if you're trying something new, like us shifting the Health Studies User Conference online, think about how you can work with your existing contacts. So having previously worked with another organization is a really good baseline for trying something new or trying something different. Secondly, I'd say reach out to those with expertise. So none of us are experts in everything, and bringing in expert speakers for events or collaborations or creating resources can only improve the end result. And linked to this, it's also important to understand your own area of expertise. So going back to the CESDA webinar, for example, that was an example of a group of people who knew their expertise and knew what they were best placed to bring to that session. Fourth, and I'll just sort of touch on this, is don't be put off by interdisciplinary collaboration. So you might have been to some of the talks on that. People who probably know a lot more about that than me, but from a personal experience, I wasn't an expert on epidemiology when I was asked to come and contribute to this cancer and chronic diseases roadshow. I'm not an expert on chronic disease, but I knew that I could bring the information and the knowledge of data discovery. So don't be put off just because it's an event that seems to have a title that's slightly different to your area of expertise. And finally, don't just see collaborations as one-off events. So although we have worked with CESDA for kind of 10 plus years, when they reached out to us to come back to this event, they were demonstrating the way in which an understanding of other people's expertise can allow collaborations to be ongoing. So when you collaborate with someone, you get an idea of their expertise and what they can bring to different events in the future. And it's really important to keep this in mind when planning future events. It means we end up building stronger networks that hopefully leave us better equipped to face any challenges in the future. So in summary, I hope I've demonstrated the importance of collaboration in our response from the UK Data Service training team, and the importance of utilising your networks and how we can build these to be stronger in the future. And I welcome any questions. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, I think that marks, we've come to the end of our session. Please give our speakers another round of applause. Both those here and online. Also, our participants, we miss you. Thank you. So, thank you. Let's go for the closing ceremony.
No problem at all. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.